You rowdy people. All right, that's better. Okay.
Crack your gavel.
Welcome to our meeting today. And I'm going to take care of a little bit of perfunctory business first, and then get into the heart of things. So we have two sets of minutes from our January meetings to approve. Didn't take care of the January 6th one at our last meeting. So could I have a motion? Let's roll those two into one motion to approve the minutes from January 6th and January 20th.
I was going to say there was a typo on one of them, and I can't find it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's get the
Brian
motion
about
and
it.
then we can see if there are corrections or adjustments.
I'll
Okay.
move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second with the correction of the typo.
Okay.
There's a word spelling.
While Marianne is looking at for that, any other comments on the minutes from January 6th and 20th? Okay. Well, let me.
Marianne had sent an email a couple of days ago with the change. It was just where the word should read shore as in shoreline.
Oh, okay.
So I changed that back. So that's good to go in my.
So it's been corrected.
Yep.
All right,
Okay.
great.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
All right. Good job, folks. Okay. I wanted to start off today by showing this is a really short video, just as a tone setter. And how I connect it with our work is, this is kind of a personal work that I do on myself, is to really try to keep in mind that, to me, the key thing about advancing inclusion and equity is listening to people. And no matter what I can think that I can do to solve problems, I try to keep in mind it's ultimately more important to try to give people the opportunity to tell their own story and express their own needs, and listen. That is what I try to keep foremost. As I say, it's how I'm trying to work on myself. If there is true listening, which the world is so noisy, listening, it gets harder and harder. And even when we think about allies and ally communities, listening is often a problem. And so if there is true listening and real acceptance of what's being heard, I think that's the key for change to happen. And so this little video is by a man named Travion Shorters, who heads an organization called Be Me. The purpose of the organization is to lift up the image and the visibility of Black men in our society. And the theme, I'm connecting it to listening, but his theme is asset framing, to really look at people as full human beings, which means they have assets to offer as well as needs to fulfill. I think this short video, which is like 1 minute and 10 seconds long, is the most cogent case for that I've ever come across. And I probably listened to 4 other cases. I don't have a great sample size, but this is really pretty impressive. And so Brian, looks like I have the ability to share.
Okay. You should.
Great. And there it is. Okay. Okay, is it on for everybody? All right, great.
It's about not defining people by their challenge, right? So once you recognize that I aspire to be a scientist or a leader, or maybe I just aspire to graduate high school, I have a goal to be a student, right? Whatever that aspiration is, if you acknowledge that aspiration before you go into my various challenges, you're telling a truer story about me, right? I don't run around believing I'm an at-risk this or a low-income that or a high poverty, high crime. Like, no one carries around those labels thinking that's how I'm going to face the world, right? What people think about is I want to maybe go to school. I want to maybe someday own a home. I want to maybe possibly get out of this neighborhood or come back to this neighborhood and build. Whatever that person's aspiration is, if you haven't bothered to acknowledge that aspiration before you engage them, then you've made them an object in the sentence. They are a thing to be dealt with, to be moved, to be manipulated. They are not a person. And once you start to engage people as obstacles, once you start engaging people as problems, then recognize that you now become the problem, right? One of the damning things about narrative is
Whoops.
whatever you repeat to people that doesn't get addressed.
Yeah, and that's it. So thanks for indulging in that. I hope you found it at least somewhat inspirational. I think it's just a terrific statement. All right, so I want to lay out the plan for today's work. And I want to ask us all to take collective responsibility for trying to help us move along. We always have this difficult balance of trying to keep moving forward, yet having such fascinating and deep things to talk about. And I want there to be breathing room for that. But we got to make our internal choices about that sometimes. So I'm just asking for everybody's collective responsibility for keeping us on time and on track. So the first thing for today will be to listen to an account from Jade and Raquel about responses to a survey, responses from the Monona Grove School District's Parent Equity Council. So we'll do that first.
So can I just interrupt you, Jason? for a
Yeah, yeah,
second?
sure.
So Jade was just messaging with me, and she says that she's very, very sorry that she isn't able to make it to this meeting because
Okay.
her daughter isn't well, and so she won't be able to make it. Our plan was to present the information together. I was going to present the first portion, and she was going to present the second portion. So I don't know if you want to continue. I can do the first portion, or we could just save it for the next time. It's up to you.
What do you think is wisest, Raquel? I mean, we can go either way, but if you think it would stick better to do it together,
Yeah,
we
I
can.
would prefer if we did it together, because
Yeah.
then we have all the information, at once, and then we don't have to come back and forth. I was hoping that we could even, I don't know, share the information, and that way folks can just look at it
Yeah.
themselves and look
Yeah.
at the responses.
Raquel, if you want to email it to me, I'll email it out to the rest of the group. That's fine.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. And then we can come back to it next meeting and see if there's additional commentary that you and Jade would like to add, or if we have some discussion about it.
That
Okay.
sounds good.
Thank you. So we're really on time now. That was wonderful in its own way. So the other thing that we'll jump into is report outs from the different work groups. I don't know whether everybody's met. There's one group that I think I'm on, Group D, with Jade and Raquel. I don't know if we've met. I do things and forget I do them, but I don't think I forgot about it. Okay. All right, so that's fine. So we have I think we'll have three short report outs. This is just to give each other a flavor of what's been going on in other work groups. This is all stuff that's under construction, so don't feel like it has to be appear finished. There are lots more thinking and choices to make ahead. This is just to give a flavor of what's coming up in the various work groups, and that may help stimulate thinking back in our own work groups too. So we'll do that. If there's time, love to be able to get some reactions. We'll keep those reactions short at the beginning till we get through all three. And then if there's extra time, we can go back and have more discussion. I just want to have like 5 minutes at the end to talk about the way forward. This will mostly be review of a path that I've kind of laid out previously, but I think it's important to go over that again. And if there are other announcements at that time, we can wrap those up at the end too. Okay, pretty clear,
And
everybody?
Sorry to interrupt. I made it. I got my phone.
Oh.
Jade. So sorry.
Okay.
Chaos for a second, but I'm here on the phone.
Wow. Wow. All right. Well, how do you, Raquel and Jade, how do you feel about it now? Do you want to, you're prepared to just go ahead with the PEC report?
Sure. Do you want to go ahead, Raquel? Do you want to start?
Okay.
Sure, I can start. So the first piece of information we gave, so we presented it to the group as just an opportunity for us to build a bridge for with the work that we're doing with the PEG group, with the district, with our group. And so we sent them out a survey with 3 questions. And the first question was, in your personal opinion, what are the top 3 obstacles and the or equitable opportunities for BIPOC in our community? So we had a big range of answers and responses. And so what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to consolidate how we can put all of this information that we got and put it into kind of the recommendations also. Those were our thoughts, because a lot of them align with some of the things that we talked about. So what we want to do is fit them into maybe some of these subcommittees so that we can come back to that group and say, hey, we're based on your answers that we got, we're going to recommend this to the city and to the mayor. So the response that we got was a lot of things in common were the lack of representation within our school curriculum for BIPOC. So the lack of representation within our leaderships, so our teachers, our staff, and the community at large. Economic development for minorities, and another equitable opportunity was to for BIPOC was someone wrote, the ability to walk or drive down the street without being criminally profiled, and the ability to be outside in one's house without being accused of breaking in or trespassing. Another response was the achievement gap for the children of color in the Monona school district, and the ability not to fear the police because of systematic racist policies and procedures within the criminal justice system. And so I think these were like the main ones for the first question. So I think some of these fall in line within our goals. Jade, did you want to go ahead with the second question?
Yeah, Raquel, do you mind just reading the second question? I don't have the question in front of me. Could you read that?
Sure. Do you feel these challenges are currently being addressed, whether by the Parent Equity Council or other groups or organizations? If so, please explain and offer us your opinion.
Yeah, so the main response for that one of them was having the police chief kind of shows that we are working on that. Having the Parent Equity Council, creating that is showing that we're working on it. And there was a feel at the school district with our superintendent and our equity coordinator that we are trying to address these issues. Can you read the third question, Raquel?
What actions or initiatives could Monona and Cottage Grove undertake that would significantly help address your top challenges?
So the two biggest things I think that stood out were a lot of training for staff and administration, and then better representation. So again, Raquel addressed that, you know, our staff is very white, our leadership is very white. So a push to really making a big effort on changing that leadership to BIPOC community members. And with our police chief, that's like a you know, good step in the right direction and proof of those changes. Just need to do more of those.
Yeah, so that was definitely a huge one, is just having that representation of people of color within our community. So Ryan, I can send you the document if I can't remember if we decided that was okay, Jade, for us to share that document so that folks can have an opportunity to just look it over, and then that way we can consolidate within our group and our work, if that works.
I think
for-
the fact no one's names are included anywhere, so I don't see why that would be a problem. Jason, you had expressed some concern, but I don't see it as
No,
a
not-
problem.
Right, not concerned. I just wanted to make sure that you felt the parents would be okay with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
personally think they would.
Yeah.
Raquel, what do you think?
no, I think they are aware that we're going to be using that information to do to do our work, and they know that we were going to share this information with you. So
There was one response that had to do about representation on boards, committees. I think it said, and was that specific about the school board? Do you know? Or maybe it was not possible to tell, or were they talking about boards and committees in general, or were they talking about school board committees?
I think since it was,
Oh,
sorry, Raquel, I
go
think that was
ahead.
more based on school committees,
Mhm.
like school board and stuff.
Great. Any questions or comments from other folks?
Can you all talk about the kinds of numbers that you got, and if you feel like you got a representative core group of people, or I mean, do you just, you know, talk about, you know, who responded, and just your opinion in terms of whether it's representative, or if there was any other things that you wish you had or something like that. Does that make sense as a question?
yes, but unfortunately we weren't able to. We didn't, like, it was completely anonymous, and so there was no names of who responded what. So we have about 9 responses out of maybe 15 members. So we're just probably, you know, I'm assuming that everyone, you know, that was able to answer the questions did. And so unfortunately we didn't have like names. We wanted to keep that part private. So did you have something to add, Jade, to her question, to Catherine's question?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. So all good.
I want to thank both of you because I was really looking forward to this information and input, because I was from past comments, some of the Black Lives Matter speeches that were made. I really had a feeling that we were really missing a big chunk of people who had a lot to offer. And I wanted to, I really wanted to get the input into this committee. And so I thank both of you.
Thanks, Mary.
Any other comments at this point? All right. Well, the document will be shared, and I think probably the best thing we can do at this point is it's easy to go through, and the various groups can just, try to keep those particular comments in mind. And it's additional input that we can work into our various zones of activity that we're thinking about. I think that'll be really useful. I think something that's true of those comments is that there is a lot of concern among the PEC or PEG members about safety and the justice system and law enforcement. And of course, what's going on in schools. Those are two sectors of activity that our group hasn't really pulled up to the front to address. I think that's okay. I mean, we could always change, try to include those too, but it may have something to do with those are systems within themselves that have an organized structure and things are happening in those systems. Maybe that has something to do with why we didn't decide to make them our priority. But in any case, and I think I've said this before, and some of us talked about this, we probably, when we come out with our final set of recommendations, we probably want to say something about collaboration and coordination between these important sectors. We have talked about the city and the school really needing, school district needing to talk to each other. So we can keep that in mind too.
Last comment I wanted to make, I know a big issue that came up quite a bit was the question if there should be police officers in the school or not. And there was a lot of people in the Parent Equity Council that did not want to have police officers in the school based on just statistical information about the negative effects of officers in schools for kids of color. So that was kind of a controversial discussion in the committee as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you. Thanks to both of you for collecting that feedback. I'll echo what Marianne said without repeating her, but that's really great additional feedback for us. And as we've come to realize, this all takes a lot of time and effort to collect that feedback. So really appreciate your hard work on that. All right. Why don't we move to report outs from our three groups? Anybody want to go first? I know the order of A, B, and C. We don't have to go in that order, but we could. Marion, you raise your hand. You're volunteering all of Group A?
I'm volunteering all of Group A, and because Jade has a sweet little baby who I've got to smile every time I hear a squeal. I'm sorry that your baby's not feeling well. I don't know if you want to talk on action 4 in case you need to bow out, because I was going to present, right now we're working off of 4 actions. I was going to report on actions 1 and 3. Christy's going to report on action 2, and Jade volunteered to tackle action 4, which was a recent add-on, as we talked through the stuff and tried to tease stuff out and group the ideas together. So I don't know if you want to talk on action 4 quick in case you need to sign off, Jade, or
I would appreciate if you don't mind, just in case. That's probably a good idea. Yeah, so action 4, so Group A.
So let's just, I'm sorry, Jade, let's make clear, in case people don't have the story the way their heads. Group A was working on draft recommendations that have to do with city responsibilities and city activities. So this group is about city government in particular.
yes.
Okay, sorry, Jay, for the interruption.
No, you're all good. So yeah, so my section was focused on communication. Okay, hold on. Actually, maybe I'll go in a second. You guys, you go first.
Okay. So the action numbers do not assign priority. It was just a way for organizing and grouping things together to try and get a handle on it. And we're still working on how best to word things to express our intent. Action 1, increase racial diversity and inclusion in Monona in leadership positions, staffing, representation on city committees, and also creating formal policies and procedures and toolkits that promote racial diversity and inclusion. It covers the core beliefs 1 and 2. Having BIPOC leaders will help ensure that issues that impact the BIPOC community are not ignored, and also will help BIPOC voices to be heard. It encompasses the following work group ideas, and if you don't have the spreadsheet in front of you, I'm going to list them, but then I'm going to kind of briefly summarize them. 1, 11, 12, 22, 29, 30, 31, 33, 35, 38, 42, 47, 48, and 49. So we really bundled a lot of work group ideas off the spreadsheet into this, but that deals with formal city policies in supporting racial equity, city toolkit for centering equity and education of new council members, housing issues with formal policies, increasing diversity on city committees, increasing transparency and allow for chair input on committee member appointments, a toolkit to help pass on the history and knowledge to new members as part of the effort to develop new leaders, including students to participate in city government, looking beyond experts for input, embed DEIB work into personnel, policy, and procedures, and conflict resolution was part of this toolkit. The tools we identified for Action 1 so far, some of the sample toolkits sent by Police Chief Brian Shaney Austin and the Dane County Youth and Government Program. Action 3, elected city leaders, city staff, and city volunteers will receive information/classes to advance their understanding of racism, equity, and conflict resolution. And this action includes the core beliefs 1 and 2. City elected leaders, staff, and volunteers will have a greater understanding of how historical actions, including the exclusion of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, have shaped our current circumstances in Monona, and what each of us can do individually and collectively to go forward to make Monona a more racially diverse, inclusive, and welcoming community that values and respects the people and groups excluded in the past. This action reflects the following work group ideas: 13, 22, 42, and 48. And it is a prerequisite for the ideas 50 and 52, which have to do with reparations and erasure of restrictive covenants, and also a prerequisite for the action statements 1 and 2. The covered work group ideas: city leaders, staff, and volunteers receive education to advance their knowledge of race, equity, and conflict resolution. A toolkit with diversity, equity, and inclusion embedded on how to center equity issues in city business and decision-making, orientation of new city council members, and the city to offer/conduct a conflict resolution class for elected officials, city staff, and volunteers. So that's 1 and 3. Jade, I don't know if you want to do 4, if you want Christy to do 2, and then you do 4 after that.
Do you mind if I go right now? We got a call moment.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Go for it.
Yeah. So mine was a recommendation of hiring a communications person for the city, for possibly the city website, or creating a diversity, equity, inclusion page, or maybe on the front of the Monona City page, kind of updating it so it has more diversity. For example, like Christy brought to the attention that, it's Black Heritage Month, it's Chinese New Year, and there's nothing on the Monona City website acknowledging either of those things. So kind of getting better with the times of keeping updated websites, but currently there's no one hired specifically for that, with that focus on diversity. So that was kind of the call for that one. I think that's it for now.
Thank you. And Christy, do you want to talk about two?
Oh, I'm almost in Jade's situation. I got kids funneling in from home, so I'm gonna give it a go, and you just wave your hands if you can't hear me, and I'll talk louder. Okay, this was the statement was, with diversity, equity, and inclusion embedded, the city should work to improve access to housing, transportation. That's public transit, school district transit, multimodal safety, internet, clean water, voting, and food. And I actually added one other thing in there because, you know, the list of basic needs kinds of keeps building with this pandemic as more challenges come forward. And so I kind of penciled in childcare there because we haven't discussed that as a group, but boy, if that's not been an issue for a lot of working families. So under that statement, I have several bullet points I'll run through. The need for more affordable housing and workforce housing. We thought maybe the city could set a percentage goal for new apartment developments to include some affordable or workforce housing. And this is a little bit tricky because we can't really do what's called inclusionary zoning because the Wisconsin Supreme Court made that illegal. They were calling that rent control. So we can't use even the phrase really inclusionary zoning, but you know, we have seen in our list of apartments developed over the past 10 years that it's all been 100% market rate. So we're just thinking, you know, if we can have a goal to create more affordable and workforce housing. Those ideas have been supported by our 2008 housing plan and the 2016 housing study done through university year. Since affordable housing and access to public transportation are inextricably linked, making sure that new affordable housing developments have access to public transit and to school district busing services. Someone in our group, I think it was Jade, shared that a family, I think they were a Latino family, had to leave the district because the school bus route did not come by their house. Also making sure that these housing developments have access to safe multimodal transportation like walking and biking. Ensure that our plan commission and transit commission know what each other is working on so that access to transportation piece is not lost. So for example, I am on plan commission and on transit. So I can be that bridge and making sure that there's someone that maybe always has that seat, keeping those two, you know, hands knowing what each other are doing. Commit to a strategic effort so food deserts aren't created. We had food in that initial blanket statement, and Marianne had shared a piece of history where there was a food desert created, and so making sure we're not doing that. Also making sure our diverse community has access to voting sites, quality internet access, and clean water. And then one other idea I kind of tapped in here, and I haven't run this by our committee because it just came up yesterday. I thought of this was the creating a fund to address the childcare crisis. So we know childcare is often an overlooked element despite being a basic need for working families. And so if there's a fund we can create to help support childcare entities in Monona, either starting or expanding capacity, I think that might be kind of cool. That idea, I can't claim credit for that idea. That is, it came from one of my tribal sisters named Jenny Van Sickle, who's a council member in Superior. You know, there's only 3 Native American city council members in the state of Wisconsin. And Jenny is the Superior constituent up there. And this was her idea. And so Superior dedicated $200,000 just last night at their council meeting for childcare. And it's part of a fund they call the Neighborhood Improvement Fund.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just going to add on a couple of comments about Group A work, and then we can move ahead. But Marianne mentioned the item having to do with the city government toolkit, and that Chief Cheney Austin was kind enough to forward some links to examples of that. And those are, we'll follow up after the meeting, but all of you can use those links if you want. We'll make sure they're in our Google Drive. These toolkits are being used in various places in the city of Madison and Detroit, Seattle, Portland. There are models that are put out by various policy organizations. They take the form of checklists or templates, forms you fill out, strategies, but they're all about leading people involved in city government through a process to analyze how their decisions would affect equity and inclusivity. So trying to make that a method that can be systematically followed. The other thing I was going to also add to was conflict management, which Marianne included in her part of the report. This may overlap with the work that's going on in another work group. We have thought about whether there can be some kind of conflict management process outside formal commission meetings or committee meetings, where difficult problems that might have to do with a subject as complicated, for example, as housing, can be tossed around in a setting that might not just involve city participants on committees, but might involve community members and other interested parties as well. But can be discussed, the underlying issues can be discussed in a venue that allows for more investigation and introspection than does a normal committee or commission meeting, to try to solve some of these deeper differences in perspectives as a way forward. So I just wanted to add on those two things. What is Group B about? I can't remember. Does Group B have a report to give?
Yes, we do. I don't think we're as far along as Group A, but just a reminder. Oops, I'm on the wrong document. That's not helpful. That's guidance, that's Group B. Okay, just as a reminder that Group B is all about cultivating and promoting community attitudes that enable BIPOC folks to feel like they truly belong in Monona, and to undertake and manage conflict around how residents view equity initiatives. So whereas Group A is really focusing on sort of actions of the city, and while ours can sort of shade over there too, it's really about thinking about how to bring people along, right? Because, you know, the city council or the mayor can do lots of things, but ultimately it's a community effort that is going to change the sort of culture and feel of our city. So I think I'm just going to go through and talk a little more process about what we've been talking about and the things that have come up, so more thematic. We have a shorter list of things. And the first thing we did was, you know, take our bucket of the B bucket and divide it into what we called sub buckets. And so at first we started talking about, can we divide these things up into issues of education, issues of engagement, or issues of action or initiatives, things like that. You know, that was sort of our first slice, you know, at trying to sort of manage this list and figure out what we want to eventually come up with to present. Want to talk a little bit about issues of leadership came up again, you know, how to cultivate leadership among folks that are part of Monona, that, you know, to take up equity initiatives as part of who they are as a group, right? One of the things we talked about is, you know, the senior center, the library, or, you know, whatever organizations There was this way we had of talking about, going to leaders of these organizations and saying, here's what you say you represent the city of Monona. There seems to be an implicit valuing of whatever it is, diversity, community, and how does that have an impact on equity, or how are you doing that work? Even just bringing up the conversation and sort of framing a conversation that says, we're looking to you to sort of do what you say you're going to do, and kind of just having that conversation would then start to make equity, diversity, and inclusion something that's part of the community conversation, right? Because maybe people haven't thought about their mission statement in a while. Maybe they haven't thought about the values that they state and how that has an impact on what happened in 2020 or, what's happening now, right? Not allowing people to opt out, right? Just because that, that isn't centrally our thing. We also talked a lot and kept coming back to an idea of a culminating event. And I think last time, I'll sort of jump ahead on what we were talking about just in the last meeting. The question that I posed to the group is, instead of we, coming up with buckets and sub buckets and then talking about actions and things like this, is there a way to organize the work that B is doing, at least to some extent, sort of temporarily, like through time, like a 1, 3, and 5 year plan, or talking about an event that we want to have in 3 years, and everything, that we're looking at in our list are things that build up to that event. The event that mostly that we were talking about was perhaps a community conference, in the way that Dr. Hooker has talked about it. And I brought it up before. Jason's read the book. Jason and I have talked about it. And whether it's Dr. Hooker or somebody else that calls together a community meeting where we talk about who we are as a community, the story we want to tell about ourselves. Perhaps someone at UW does this work and we don't even know. But the idea of some culminating event that things build toward might be a way of sort of organizing what Group B is doing. We didn't come up with the sort of set actions, like Group A has sort of divided things up into 4 actions. I think that's where we are headed next time. And I think we sort of summarized it as kind of outreach to leadership organizations in Monona. I think Jerry has brought up more than once the idea of an accountability committee, perhaps a subset of this committee or other folks that would come together every 6 months and meet with, say, the city council, but that's not necessarily the only folks that meet with, but to say, so how's it going? Let's look at the benchmarks. Are we meeting? Are we hitting the goals that we say we want to? And obviously these goals can include all kinds of goals that we're coming up with in all the groups and all the sort of actions that we're talking about. And then, like I said, building toward a transformative community conference or some other event like that. I think the way I framed it is I was sort of advocating for some kind of culminating event, because I tend to think like an organizer, and getting people sort of pointed in a direction, this is what we're working toward, helping people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, I find can be, at least I've found has been quite effective in motivating people to shift as a community member, right? It's, can change hearts and minds sometimes. So I think I'll leave it there and then ask Marianne and Jerry to chime in, and Jason, who was in our last meeting too.
I was going to say thank you. The 2 big things that we're kind of working is this is a community focused group as opposed to a city government focused group. And for me, it boiled down to education, how to educate the people in the community so they are not staying within their own bubble. They actually learn about people that are different than them, learn about the history of how we got to this point. And then also the education part in terms of conflict resolution. So we also talked about the Transformative Community Conference, and I did watch the entire hour and 40-minute thing. It was very good. It was very dense. I had to stop it every once in a while just to kind of catch up with what he was saying. And it sounded like a long process if you, it isn't just waving a magic wand. Jerry also had some ideas on a more personal level, because I was thinking more in terms of community classes and community conflict resolution. And those were my two big things that somehow we have to work on.
This is Jerry. Catherine and Mary, nice job on that. The review, that was great. I really don't have a ton more to add. I think you captured kind of what our group was discussing. And I think one of the, outside of the idea of this specific group having more of a vision that might be on a timeline schedule, then they would have tasks was just something I know I took from that discussion, that we kind of wanted to maybe formulate some of our thoughts in a slightly different way than specific actual action items that are like a get it done once, or it's a maybe because we know somebody's going to take a while to do. So it might be, you know, this is like a 5-year plan, or this is a 1-year plan for this one, and just have different goals based off of time. I did watch that video as well. It was great. Again, I need to go back and watch it again because it is pretty dense, but it was really helpful. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, we can make that available to everybody. Wow, Marianne, I mean, both of you, wow, you got to that so fast. I'm impressed. But we can share that with everybody. It's something this group has been thinking about. If you're interested, you could take a look. It's about this process that Catherine had introduced to us really early on, called Transformative Community Conferencing, created by Professor David Hooker. And I have nothing to add. Thanks for those great report outs.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Thank you, everybody. Are you able to share it maybe in the chat? Is that possible?
Why don't we have, I'll send it to Brian. Brian's going to be getting out a follow-up.
Okay, sounds good.
And it'll be there.
Yeah, and I watched it too. It's also in our folder. So that's where I found it, was in our folder.
That's true, right? It is in folder too. Yeah, we'll get it to you a number of ways.
Awesome.
Okay, shall we go to Group C?
Yes, that's me. I was leading the group, but Christy, Catherine, Alicia, we're all part of the group. Our as a overarching theme, we're looking at the theme of culture and business. Sponsor activities and events that showcase racial and ethnic diversity in culture and the arts and in business. Our group has met once. We meet again tomorrow, and our focus was just having a really good discussion about a lot of these things. And I do have to say, having Christy in the group, kind of her insights with a lot of things that have with her experience with the chamber, with being on council, knowing a lot of the insights on what's happening in those spheres, and her experience in those really helped with our conversation. So thank you. I think it helped the conversation a lot. There was a lot of things in our list from events that we talked about, who were the decision makers on those, and how to kind of help to get the right, or just to have the right voices speaking into who gets hired for these events, getting other businesses or other ethnic groups or diverse groups into Monona in that way. One of the other things about the kind of what I call it the events category was even this exposure, like the farmers market, there's opportunities for a lot of small businesses. They can come in, that Monona can really kind of champion them and kind of give them spaces to thrive where there's already a lot of people coming to these events where we can kind of help that and help encourage them, their businesses, organizations, to kind of, highlight them. So kind of having more of an effort on that with festivals, things of that nature. Things like the library, adding more content, supporting them in their ways that they want to. Minority-owned businesses, trying to get something through the city. And I know Christy's already kind of started that, pushing that a little bit, getting some more information. One of the other themes was, we didn't really talk about this one, but the visuals of the sales in Monona. There's some people that have mentioned comments of that. Again, we just haven't gotten there. We haven't had that discussion yet about kind of how people perceive us by what they see. But it is one of the important things that we need to be thinking about. A lot of the part of the events as well is the kind of the art that's being displayed in Monona, a lot of the businesses that have these murals and things of that nature. There are some good positive things from the businesses that have liked them. There's been some negative, but I think they've been kind of told not to do something bad. It'd be a negative thing on them if they actually did something. Yeah, so there was a lot of really great discussion, and there were some interesting things that came out too regarding. It kind of goes back to the discussion I had with Group B, was the idea that a lot of these groups, the chamber, any of the the animal groups, the Lions Club, all of those that have a stake in Monona, getting an understanding of what their mission, like Catherine said earlier, is when it comes to the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion. What is it, and really to challenge them as well to kind of step up their game on that area, and that could really help our city if that is done. But again, it'd be something that we would need to kind of reach out and find out where they even land in those. And there are groups as well that we've had this conversation, and part of a group that are that are not inclusive to even females. And so there's things that we need to address there and say, well, does the city of Monona, should we even accept gifts or anything from them if we think they're, it's off? And if they are kind of perceiving, have a perception that they are not being inclusive, and have a very strong voice there, by their actions, I would say, not vocal, but by their actions. It'd be something that we'd want to discuss with the city on even accepting of gifts of that nature. I was going to bring it out to the rest of the group if they want to add anything else.
It really was just our first conversation, so it was kind of wide ranging.
Great, thank you very much. I'll be participating in Group D, so we haven't gotten started yet, but I'm going to make
Well, actually, Jason, so Raquel and I did meet.
Okay.
I had a phone conversation one time, and I'm sorry that you're in Group D. I don't think we knew that.
Yeah.
And I apologize.
Yeah,
We
I
will
signed up
make sure-
after the meeting, after our last meeting.
Okay, so we will have another meeting and you will definitely be included. And so Raquel and I did have a bit of a chance to, so the Group D is kind of that cultural or the community connection. And we're excited. Raquel and I are both in another committee called the Affinity Group. And currently it's Raquel, myself, Lori Gage from the Monona Grove School Board, and Shelby Steele, the Equity Coordinator for the school district. And really just working on how to find families, BIPOC families, and really how to connect them and create safe spaces for them to come together and again, just have a bigger voice and feel more a part of the community. So currently, recently, Raquel just created an invitation of 4 dates, kind of starting summerish time, May, June, and July, or maybe April, May, June, July. And they're just meetings at parks. And the goal is kind of going to be word of mouth. So any families of color that people know, to let them know about these events that are just in parks, that they're going to kind of vary on what they are. Some of them might be potlucks. Some of them food might be provided. Some of them will have music. Some of them will have games. But again, it's really just to let families of color know you're not alone, and this is your home. These are your neighbors, and hoping that at those relaxed park kind of events, you can find people who might be interested in leadership roles and find out what their passions are, find out what their skills and talents are, where maybe introducing them to, hey, we're really looking for someone to take over this committee spot in Monona, you'd be a great fit. And so that could kind of create a pool of candidates possibly. So just that's kind of where Raquel and I are, and hopefully Jason as well, are focused currently.
Wow, that's excellent. That's tremendous. Yeah, I look forward to joining that conversation. And Jerry, don't hate me, but I know this stuff is up your alley too. And I'll bet at some point you thought, well, I should probably be on that work group. So I'm going to say, if you think you have the time, maybe reach out to Raquel. Maybe you're doing the organizing, or Raquel or Jade, and say, hey, include me in your scheduling. Sorry,
Include
Jerry.
me into your scheduling. Done.
Okay.
I'm in.
We got
Ready to go. All right.
I have a question. The affinity groups are for the events that you're talking about in the park. Are these for families with school-age children or families without school-age children too?
It's really for the whole community. So they do not need to have school-age children at all. It is. I think that's an easier focus currently with Raquel and I, with our kids in school and with us being on the Parent Equity Council. But again, like any of your neighbors, or and they don't necessarily even have to be from Monona. They could be outside of Monona, but we're just trying to create diversity around in and around Monona.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, all 4 groups. We do have some time. So if anybody has any comment on anything they've heard in these report outs from the groups, we've got some time to talk and listen a little bit.
I just want to say I'm really impressed with everything that you all have come up with. You never know with these kinds of groups, with volunteers and people who are busy and how life happens, what you're going to get or how these timelines go. But I'm blown away. You guys have really made a lot of progress in the last couple of weeks. So this is awesome. So thank you for your hard work.
Thanks, Karen. It's really encouraging.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I had one thing I kind of missed on my report, and it was that we do have a first-time homebuyers program in Monona, funded through our Renew Monona program, which is funded through TIF and developments that happen in the city. And so one of those things was making sure that that first-time homebuyers program, number one, that people know about it, and that the structure of it is set up so that it's accessible in a timely manner, so end users can effectively use it in a competitive buying environment, which Monona is a competitive buying environment almost at all times. So that was one thing I kind of forgot to mention. And I don't know, Brian, do you want to add to that? Because I think you sent me an email about how that worked, and I can't remember it off.
Sure. So I'd have to look up the documents in specific, but yeah, she's right. It's part of a much larger Renew Monona loan program that we provide for a couple of different buckets of work related to single family housing. So it's either first time home buyer program, and I believe the max we would loan out for down payment assistance is $20,000. And then there is a bucket of work related to as many of you are aware, the housing stock, some of the housing stock in Monona is built in the 50s and 60s. And so a lot of families who own those homes want to stay in those homes, and they have, growing families or whatever, and want to be able to kind of expand in place rather than having to look, for housing somewhere else. So there is kind of a rehab component where you can apply for money to add on to a house or make improvements to plumbing or those type of things to make the house more livable for families that are there. And then there's a third bucket of work for things like if somebody wanted to install kind of renewable energy technology to their house or make improvements to remediate environmental hazards on their house. So if there was lead or radon or something like that, there's can get a loan for remediation there. I think those are the main categories that program funds. But yes, so for first time home buyer, that can be a pretty quick process if we get an application, depending on the dollar amount that they're asking for, we can turn that around pretty quickly if somebody's looking for that. So.
And how can we share this information with folks?
I can add that in my email that I send out. We've got it on our city's webpage. We do, some periodic advertising through our existing city channels, but we're more than happy to get that out to folks and let them know. So I'll add it to my list of things I send out.
Brian, at one point we were talking about the difference between first-time home buyers and first-generation home buyers as a way to think about, and it was in the context of our conversation about racial covenants. And I'm just wondering if that's part of the conversation, part of this. I mean, is that conversation happening anywhere, whether it's Monona or this larger state program?
I don't know if it's happening on a statewide level within the kind of context of our existing program. I don't think there's an issue with us changing that language. The CDA is taking a look at that. So they'll be able to make those tweaks here probably in the next couple weeks. But yeah, I don't think there's any issue with us changing it from first time to first generation, provided that we can provide an explanation to folks who aren't in this type of work like you all are to understand what that means. But yeah, I don't see there being any issues with that.
And something I just want to throw out about first-time homeowners, like a number of my families I work with don't have a big credit history. A lot of them prefer to work more with cash or just aren't as familiar with the whole idea of credit and having debt. And so, getting a home loan can be a very foreign idea, or how to create that credit history can be a big obstacle to a lot of first home buyers, especially the Latino community.
That's a good point. Thank you. I just wanted to shift just a little bit in terms of something that I heard too. And Jerry, I think you left this off your list, but then I heard it again for Group D, and especially what Raquel and Jade brought forth. And that's the idea of, meeting your neighbors And having block parties and having social gatherings and not being so siloed in our, whether it's single family homes or whatever. And, it's not like we can mandate that or the city council can do something about it, but I just want to sort of stick a pin in it as a theme that it sounds like that sort of way of encountering neighbors around food and getting together and creating opportunities to have conversations with people who have different ideas than you do or something is just a theme that was coming up in conversations that we were having, and that Raquel and Jade brought it up too in a kind of more formal proposal is just something that I just want to remark on and say that might be something to continue to think about.
I'll echo that. It's Jerry brought forth the idea of block parties before, and when Jade was giving the report on D that Raquel and Jade were working on, I saw overlap with some of Group B's ideas about how to get people out of their silo and expose them to other people. I realized the focus of D might be a little bit more feeling some bolstering or feeling not alone, and not feeling that you're the one that has to do the outreach. So I realize there's a slight difference in focus between Group B, where we're looking for cross-pollination, or Group B, we're looking for cross-pollination, and Group D, we're looking for bolstering support within. So I realize there's two slightly different focuses, but I think some of the events could cross over in their goals.
Yeah, nicely put, Marianne. Other discussion?
So I just wanted to bring up when we had our discussion group, Christy brought up an organization that I was not aware of, and just wanted to know if you guys were aware of, about what is it called, Christy? The Men's Association that you were telling us about?
Yeah, it was the one that someone referenced about they don't allow women to join. It's Monona Grove Business Men's Association, MGBMA.
And is it just women, or was it minorities as well, or?
They don't have anything like that published on their website. They've kept it. One second. I have a 1 year. It's like a 1-year-old toddler, but it's in a dog body, and it's very big. They don't have any information like that on their website. Their website's very vague, but yeah, they really are just it's a white men's group. I have tried to join multiple times and not have had any luck.
But yeah, I just thought it was interesting, and being aware of what organizations do still exist here in Monona, and how are they representing our diversity, inclusion, equity ideas. And
All right. Well, let's see if we are ready to move on. I'm going to give my remarks about how we go forward, and we'll be able to end early tonight. Any objections to that? I didn't think so. Okay. So our work groups will continue the work, and for the February 17th meeting, it would be great if we could continue to refine and shape our ideas for recommendations using the template that I provided earlier. which let me show that so you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's called, I know some of you do know. All right, I'm going to share my screen for a moment. So guidance for draft recommendations. And so obviously you would describe the action. You would name the purpose and impact. Now, what I want to say about this is that you may feel like it's obvious from your description of the action what the purpose and impact is. And that's fine, but please state the purpose and impact anyway. You might start off by looking at your action and thinking, oh, is this really an action? Like if I said, take steps to eliminate discrimination in Monona, is there much of an action there, or is that really more about the outcome? So, but there are many actions where the purpose seems built in, but state it as a purpose, make it into an outcome statement anyway. This is just to make sure we're very confident about how we speak about these ideas. And then the second statement under purpose and impact says, how is this action aligned with at least one of our two core beliefs? I'll repeat again, it should be easy to align with either one of our two core beliefs. I'm going to go into that document with the core beliefs. I've made edits to incorporate the comments that some of you left there. I'm going to go in and clean it up and put it into its current form without the markups showing. So they cover a lot of ground, but it's again so that we can, when we end up talking about these recommendations, they all attach to a real moral case that we're going to make, an ethical underpinning. Then interim and final outcomes. Again, this is going to help us think a little bit more concretely about what we're suggesting. A lot of what we're going to recommend are really long-term initiatives. And so when we talk about the first interim outcome after 6 months or within the first year, it may be, in some cases, nothing but getting a process started, which is okay. But it's going to be useful to start thinking about what does implementing a recommendation look like. But I'd also say don't get too hung up, just make a stab at it, and through further discussion, we might be able to refine a little bit. Don't get too hung up on this, but it is time to start thinking about how this will play out. And the next category is related to that in terms of how things play out, who needs to be involved in making things happen. So it's a good time to start thinking about listing specific organizations or individuals there. This question section it has always been about just keeping track of what questions we still need to answer, what kind of investigation we still need to do. And even if there are questions that won't be answerable by us, but that can only be answered after implementation or further process development gets underway, after we make our recommendations, that's fine. It'll just be helpful to have that kind of knowledge about where questions remain stored in here. So that's what I would ask you to do. Now, you can see from the report outs that there's a bunch of different levels of specificity or generality that we've been approaching our discussions through. And that's going to remain up to the work groups, how you might want to package things or consolidate things or tease things out, whatever makes whatever communicates the goals most effectively, just go with that. Like one recommendation that you would flesh out with this template might involve 5 separate actions or you might choose to list each action as a separate recommendation. That's really up to you at this point. In the end, when we write up a report, we're going to have to think about how to organize things so that there's a coherence throughout the report. So you don't have to worry about what's finally going to look like. Just think about what's going to communicate the intention most effectively at this point. All right, let me stop sharing. I've got a few more things I want to communicate. Also, it's time to start thinking about being selective. I don't know that we'll necessarily have to limit the number of recommendations we make, but I do think it will be really beneficial to our cause to be able to draw attention to what we think is most important. This enterprise that we've been embarked on, it leads to many years of work. We can't expect, that there will be some short-term results, hopefully, but to have a real impact on Monona, we're talking about a decade or more. So we got to keep that in mind. And also, and that means thinking about what do we think is going to have the most impact long-term? What can we get started that will be able to sustain itself and will generate momentum? And we don't have to try to do everything because we're never going to do that. So that's why when I say, let's start thinking about being selective, if we were to envision the city or the community of Monona only doing 5 things, what would we want those 5 things to be? If we put out this big list with dozens of recommendations, we want to have some influence about where the priorities are, not leave it up to others to cherry pick. I like this one, or this one's easy to do. This one will make me look good. We want to influence what those priorities are. So that really calls on us to really, and this is hard work. This is pretty challenging work to think about what's most important. But I think the thing to keep in mind related to that is you can't get everything going at once, but once successful things start rolling, other things start to get pulled into the process. That's the way things work. It's not by everything going forward at once. And so we can have we can be as broad in our list of recommendations as we want to be, but I think it's really important to have a focus on what our priorities are, knowing what the realities of how things roll out are. All right, and I kind of keep emphasizing that because it really is difficult work. I also want to say that maybe starting with the meeting after February 17th is when I hope our whole group can start thinking as a whole group again about what those priorities are. So it'd be really helpful if the work groups were able to kind of advance out of all the things that we thought about and maybe even written up. These are the ones we think are most important. But I really like the whole group to be able to respond to that. And when we get there in a meeting or two, that will mean that we really all need to be ready to be honest and forthcoming about our views sometimes on other people's work. I think, the benefit of all this discussion we've had over the past months is we kind of know each other. We've heard a lot of points of views where we're used to working with each other. And it's really time to capitalize on that, that building of a group identity and trust, and really be willing to look at what's going to become our work product as a whole group with a critical eye, a constructively critical eye. So I just want to encourage people to kind of start moving into that mindset over the next meeting or two. Any final comments? I'm not going to let you go through all that early, but any other comments on, final comments on the process or anything else before we wrap up?
I guess a little clarity for the next meeting, the February 17th meeting. Kind of like, what's our homework assignment for that? You talked about by March, you want us to look at it as a group as a whole. So for the 17th, you want us to work on priorities. You want us to work on fleshing out the form in terms of action, purpose, questions, all that is, I'm just verifying, make sure I have the.
Yeah, Marianne, thanks. Yes, that would be ideal. That would be ideal if the work groups finish their part for the February 17th meeting. If it doesn't happen, we'll deal with it. It's all right. I mean, you know, that's kind of asking a lot. And if it can't happen, we'll just take more time. In March, when we start meeting in March, it would be great to the degree we can to start looking at the work group, the subgroups work as a whole body. Any other final comments?
I just have a couple announcements. It may not be right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
If anyone else
sure.
wants to process. Okay, I just wanted to announce that I'm really excited. Last night was the Public Works meeting and the Vibrant Hydrants program was approved and people are excited about it. So if people didn't hear about that, so we're gonna collect about, we had to reduce the scale just because of some extra costs, but we're looking for 10 to 15 artists to paint fire hydrants in Monona. And we're looking for underrepresented artists. We're gonna really target BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and veteran artists. It'll roll out September 11th. Artists will be paid a stipend of $300 and materials will be provided. There will be a selection committee gathered that will approve the designs and the artists. And then this is in collaboration with our fire department, because as I said, it'll roll out September 11th and it's kind of in honor of the people we lost on September 11th. And there will also be a parade of hydrants where the fire truck will roll through the city, but also we'll have parades hopefully on foot or on bike of people touring those hydrants and the artists having artist talks and what inspired their work. And a lot of that we're going to ask that it be, you know, cultural or maybe relating to how 9/11 affected them. So really excited. So that, and then I wanted to share something that someone shared with me today about One City Schools has a program. It's called Building Black Wealth, and it's called the Building Black Wealth Program and Down Payment Fund for One City Schools. And so they have this groundbreaking initiative to create and offer a wealth building educational program and real estate fund that focuses on creating generational wealth. And so it has this big education piece about real estate and racism. They're striving to create change for the community, by the community. And then they have this community wealth fund, which is offers down payment assistance. And so there's kind of 4 key tenets, and one is money, fundraising, and distribution. So they have a goal of raising $250,000 so they can help families purchase real estate in 2022. They have this education for One City families. So, you know, financial literacy probably, and all types of other educational opportunities for home buying, the home buying process. And then education for the community and redistribution of wealth. So this will be education and workshops that teach the historical context of racism within real estate. And then education for the real estate industry, and that's racial justice in real estate. So it sounds really cool. This will be shared out. I've got this 2-page document on it, and that'll be shared out by City Administrator Gadow. And then the person who shared it with me is named Heather Kapp. And she actually just sent me a presentation on it too. So I haven't looked at that yet. I just heard the ding and saw it come in. But I think that might be a cool thing to share as well.
Great. Thanks, Christy. All
That
right.
was gonna be right in line with the kind of things that we're talking about. So that's super exciting.
It really is. I think we've just got a really awesome opportunity to work with them, in what we're doing. And it's gonna be a lot of alignment there, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and the hydrants project sounds wonderful. I'm thinking maybe those sales next. Who knows? Okay. Thanks, everybody. We will get some follow-up material out to you. I just want to ask Jade and Raquel, is it all right if I put that document with the PEC feedback in our Google Drive as well as a way for people to get to it? Okay. And since
Yeah.
I have that, I've got a few other things to forward to Brian. I could just take care of that in my same
Yep.
email to
Yeah,
Brian.
just send it to me and I'll get the email out to the
Okay.
rest of the group tomorrow afternoon sometime.
All right, terrific. Great. Great work, everybody. Lovely to see you this afternoon.
I'll
Take care.
move to adjourn.
I second.
Thank you.
Hey, look,
Way
those
to
same
go.
last time, so good on you guys.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.